So, today is a special episode of the Co-Design Health podcast because I was inspired by a friend of mine, Eva Sturtewagen, a few months ago, who told me that she finds it very challenging to be a mother, to have cancer, and to know that she has a young child at home. And that's really something she was really asking me to figure out, like what happens in that situation, what can you do? So I thought, okay, that's a great opportunity for me to maybe invite some other experts and to maybe start a co-design process to explore the problem and really see what's going on in that particular experience of young parents who have got a child or have maybe a child that is a little bit older. This session is really nice because it's really a session that is inspired by a dear friend of mine who was close to my heart. Eva Sturtewagen was a woman who I knew very well. We were friends and I visited her a few months ago in June. And we were talking about what are the challenges for young adults or young people or young parents. And she said, well, there's one thing that comes into my mind that really strikes me is that when I'm a young parent and I'm here in the hospital, how do I deal with the fact that I'm next to a patient, also a parent? Mm-hmm. How do I take care of my child when she is young and I can't see her? And also others she knew had similar problems and challenges. And these are things that I thought, wow, that's interesting, but what solutions are there? And I started looking for some interesting research. But one of the things that I found is that very little is available for these people. But luckily, I had some people in my network who I could contact. So these people I invited here today. So one person is maybe most obviously, most directly involved is Mark Van Achter. He is the husband of Eva. Eva unfortunately passed away, but we are very lucky to have Mark here to talk a bit more about the problem. We also have Nel Kleverlaan, who I invited, who I knew from the past also because she works with people with cancer and she does many things. But one of the things she does is she helps parents also who have children who are ill. And also we have Ruocha Wang here, who I work together with. I'm doing research projects, and one of the projects I'm working on was the one on sexuality and intimacy for young adults with cancer. So that's how we met, and I thought it would be interesting as well to have your designer view on this problem. And on my left we have Dr. Josée Zijlstra, who was suggested by me by Dr. Evelyn Monten, who is the director or manager of the National AYA Care Network. So I'm very happy to have you also here to share your perspective as a medical professional on this topic. So thank you all for being here. Let's start maybe with some introductions first, and then we can move on to how we perceive each the problem. Okay, Dr. Josée Zijlstra, thank you very much for being here. Can you share a little bit more about your experience, how you came to be interested in this topic, or why you want to be here?
Yes, thank you for the invitation. I'm working as a hematologist in the Amsterdam University Medical Center. And as a hematologist, I'm often treating patients with all kinds of hematological malignancies, especially patients with Hodgkin's lymphoma and patients with acute leukemia. So I often see new patients who I have to tell that I have bad news for them because they have Hodgkin's lymphoma or non-Hodgkin lymphoma or acute leukemia, and it's often a big disaster if I have to tell young patients that they are severely ill. Mm-hmm. And often I experience that they are a bit in distress because mm-hmm. they not only have to deal with their own new diagnosis, but they also have to deal with how do I tell it my children. Mm-hmm. Yes. And it depends on the age of the children how they can best share this message with them. And in my experience, it's very important to be transparent and to deal your concerns with people, young people, especially because they feel that something is going differently, is going wrong. And I often invite parents to bring children with them to the hospital,
Mm-hmm.
and so that they can see where the hospital is and where the department of treatment is, and that they see that I'm the doctor, and although I have to tell bad news, I'm not a bad person, and I try to do the best for their mother or their father, and that they can ask me questions. I often invite them to within the room and say, okay, what do you think? What's going on? And what are you worried about? And then it's very good to talk also with young children what's going on. And sometimes they bring their puppies with them, and then we say, okay, you are the doctor and your puppy is ill. How would you try so that they can play what they experience within the situation at home.
Okay, thank you very much. Just to have an idea maybe for who is listening, and what's your background or what's your experience with young parents? Is it so that most people you see already have a child when they are coming to you for diagnosis? Or are most people younger and they don't have a child yet?
Yes.
What kind of parents?
In both situations, sometimes they have only a wish to have children in future, and then when they have a new diagnosis of cancer, I discuss with them about the measurements we can advise them to preserve their fertility for a man and for women. And sometimes they are even younger and don't have a partner, but are willing to have children in future when they have a partner. And then we discuss what can be done before starting treatment. And in many cases we can advise them to have specific measurements for fertility preservation.
And in terms of the numbers, is this like, do you see somebody who is a parent who gets diagnosed every day, or is this once a week, or what type of numbers are we talking about?
Yeah, once a week.
Once a week.
Yeah,
wow.
once a week.
Okay.
Yeah,
It's terrible.
Yeah.
A lot.
Yeah.
But a lot of work for you as well.
Yeah.
Okay, maybe let's move on to Mark. Mark, so you're here, of course, because you're the partner of Eva, but can you tell us a bit more about your background as well?
My own background then. So I am, here I am as the partner of. So since December, she was in this trajectory. You don't know Eva, of course. Eva was a very Croatian inspirational person. Fighting through this disease as good as she could. And who I am is because I did it, but mostly also because she supported me a lot. So I used to be a professor at Erasmus University in Rotterdam until 2 years ago, and then I shifted my focus and I became a guest professor at Leuven University in Belgium now. Which is fun. I like to teach, so I do that for pleasure, almost for fun. And beyond that, I started to grow my playful nature, and I started 2 board game cafes. They are called, meaning in the center of Antwerp where we live, a cafe where you can just arrive and take a game and play. That's the concept. So something which is not economic. So I'm a finance professor, but I chose the least finance job actually I could have taken. So. But that doesn't matter. So it's that really doesn't matter. It's for passion and for living, or for where the energy lies. That's what I'm doing now. And Eva supported that. So she had a very stable job, a very stable person as well. She was very present in a very noble and good way. So even throughout her disease, she kept on supporting me. It's very strange. That's why also I didn't hesitate a second when I was invited to this podcast, because it's the least I could do for her. So since let's say December 1st was our diagnosis. Your story rings a bell to me as well. So this was a Saturday where she was diagnosed with acute leukemia, and then life's changed, of course. So Saturday it was the diagnosis. We were hospitalized instantly. Monday morning we were at the fertility doctor as well to see where we could preserve some eggs as well. We chose not to do that because it was another couple of weeks we had to wait for that. So the whole So you're pushed from white to black, if you want. So a very, very big jump. So in a couple of days, life changed. And since then, the first few months, she underwent 3 chemo treatments, which went very well. She had some side reactions to them, but she was doing very well. She also had a very good understanding with her hematologist. It was Dr. Verlinden, if you know her.
Yeah.
Exactly, yeah. Very good understanding. They were like kindred spirits, I guess, very close, intellectually challenging each other, which was very good.
Yeah.
Had her stem cell transplantation in the spring. This one should have been March, April, I guess. Brother was a very good match, 99%. And then it lasted 2 or 3 weeks only, and she was diagnosed again with the same disease. And then it seems like the disease takes, or the treatment at least, you know better than me, I guess, but it takes like a trial and error form. So there's no clear path. You have several parallel options which you have to choose. Other hospitals are asked, but it didn't really. She was hospitalized again for 2 months, undergoing some chemo again, but her white blood cells went to almost 0, and she got the 4th lung infection, which was the last one actually. And then to the topic. Shall I already go to the topic, or is it just an opening?
I think it's okay as an opening statement, and then later we can dig in a bit more into the problem, how Eva described it as well. So thank you very much, Mark.
Most welcome. Yeah.
Okay, Nel, thank you very much for being here. You're also a magnificent expert on this field. Can you tell us a bit more about your background? A short few notes, maybe.
For instance, thank you very much for the invitation. It's very nice to be here and to see you all. I'm working for lots of years as a child psychologist. That's how I started years ago. And one of my most important focus was on the oncology, and that's because one of my own children was being diagnosed with cancer when he was very ill, very young. And at that time, as a parent, you're going down in the roller coaster. And after that, at least he's well. He's a big man with a daughter, so it's very nice. But at that time, after a few years, I discovered that there was nothing for children with parents with cancer, because there was a lot of information about children with cancer themselves.
Yeah, exactly.
But there was no information, nothing at all for children with parents with cancer.
Yeah, exactly.
And I thought, well, I had to do something about that. And so I started a program and make things, make movies with children. I talk with children, I talk with parents, I talk with grandparents, and well, that was 20 years ago, and then I just do it now.
Great.
And I learned a lot from the children and from the parents about the questions they have, about talking or not talking with your children, about what the children want. And that's very important, and why they talk or why they don't talk. And it's a lifelong experience to do it like that. And I'm here because I'm also the president of Kankerspoken, and Kankerspoken is a website in which we put all the information we have for the children, but also for parents and their teachers and the doctors and the nurses. If they have questions about, what shall I tell to my children, or as a doctor, what can I give to our patients about this theme, this we try to put it on the website so that we can help a lot of people, and there's also we make movies from it, and so a lot of things. Really nice. That's really amazing. I really want to delve into what you have made later. Thank you, Nel. Ruocha, thank you for being here. Can you also explain a little bit about
your background, because you've also had some experience already, some research and with this topic.
Sure. Thank you for bringing me here, and it's very nice to be around experts of the field and expert of experiences. I just graduated from TU Delft, Master of Science in Product Design, and my graduation project was in collaboration with VUMC and the National Young and Cancer Platform, and I was looking into sexuality and intimacy care for young cancer patients. And during the interview, I also heard a lot of their insights from their experience about how this sudden change in life affect their ideas of parenthood and of actually the whole family life as a whole. And I'm very curious what we can come up with today.
And you also told me that you've already, back in Singapore, you already had some experience you've been on the Department of Oncology there, or?
I exchanged to Singapore for 1 semester, and because I already knew I was gonna do something for cancer patients for my graduation, so I went to the National Cancer Center, which is the only cancer center in Singapore, and for them they have social workers managing all the resource and dealing with the psychological burden and medical burden for the whole family. So I think that's very nice. And in Holland there's another way, which is also quite amazing to me, how much support people get from the healthcare system, but they're different. And now I'm very curious. I keep thinking it every day. How do each country, with the limited resource they have and the mentality of their people, to create things for their patient to make their life easier?
Yeah, it's really interesting because you have both experience from Singapore and your home country in China, and both studying here. It's a nice experience. So let's start a bit about let's think a little bit about the future. Let's jump into the future. Let's start with you, Dr. Zijlstra. Knowing that there are a lot of problems here right now, and knowing that we are here as experts, I mean, there are people who can help. We're not on our own, but we have challenges. But imagine what would be a future like for you, where healthcare would be better for these kind of parents. How would you envision that? What would it feel like? How would it look like? How would it? What would you have in mind?
Yeah, I think I have two different perspectives. For patients being treated within hospital, it would be good if they can have their children around, if the children also want that. And I think it's good because patients are getting chemotherapy and they have very bad days, but also good days. And at the days they feel well, it would be very good, I think, if they can have their children around. And now, at this moment, it's sometimes difficult because the hospital rooms are rather small and there are many patients around, and it's difficult to get a more home-like environment. For me, we are now designing a new department, hematology department, within our hospital. Nice. And we have, for all the rooms, we have a rooming in facility, so that they have the possibility for partners or children to be roomed in, so they can have a bed within the hospital room, so that they can have their nearest ones around. So I think that would be good for also for little children to see that mom or dad is not far away, and not so far that they can't reach each other. And of course you can Skype and you can have telephone calls, but it's different from getting a hug and being near. That's I think different from just FaceTiming or just
also that they can really see what's happening. That's
because I think when you leave children out, they are imagination and thinking what's going on, and they have their own fantasy stories, which can be very frightening. And I think just to be transparent and to be open, I think that can leave out all kind of anxieties.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. You also mentioned you have some ideas about people out of the hospital.
Yes.
Can you tell us a bit more?
Yes, for patients being on a daycare unit or outpatient care, it's also important to have the children around. And I invite them often to be in the room where we discuss all the options. But also when they are going to the daycare unit, we have separate rooms where the children can be around, because then they can see what's going on and what kind of infusion, blood infusion they get, and they see who the nurses are, who the doctors are, and they can talk. Because I think it's very important to have the children nearby in the same situation, and then they go back home and take the children with them, but to share. I think that's I think the best way.
There's a feedback effect as well to the parent.
Yeah.
To even
absolutely,
if his parent is ill. I know, for instance, Eva was. Our daughter is 1 year old only.
Oh yeah.
So that doesn't really.
A little one. Yeah.
But she couldn't see her all the way through every of the chemos. And not seeing her broke a lot of things.
Yeah.
She always recuperated from that, but it's tough. And having these family rooms is very
I think it's very good. And also I would I encourage parents and children to make photographs and to make movies while they are in hospital, because you don't know what's going on, and they have the pictures and the movies to have the voices, and if
show it at school.
Yes,
so
yes,
to
share
with
their
share it with their friends and on school.
And to process
what's happening
at home as well.
Yes,
image being very clear.
And to discuss again what's going on. What did you feel? What was frightening? What was a good moment? And to talk and re-talk again. And you don't know what's going on. And as if the situation as with Eva, when it's going another way you expect, another way you are hoping for, then when your daughter is 5 or 6 or 10, she can discuss again, and the movies and the pictures I think are very important, because it's a very important part of life, and you would like to have it
like manifested, documented.
Keep it as a tradition. I did it as well, if I can.
You did, okay. You did.
So I made a lot of. Eva didn't like it, so because she was in her bed. But I made a lot of videos with Ida, with our daughter then. And now I show them. Even though she's very young, of course, she's 16 months now. But it's. It kind of
and then to keep a remembrance also on the
bad periods.
So but also that she see this is my mother, and although she's not here around, if I was my mother,
there is something concrete indeed.
Okay, that's a great start for some good futuristic ideas. A few questions now, because unfortunately due to time pressure, Dr. Zijlstra has to go. But let's have a short discussion.
Do you think that the doctors need, not need, but that the doctors communicate easily with children, because it's your communication is so easy. You told us this, but I have sometime or other experience that doctors said, no, I'm for the patients and or for the parents, and but to respond to the question of a child is
tough.
What do you think about that?
I think it differs. I'm a mother myself,
of course.
So that makes it different, because I know how children respond and what kind of questions they have. So I can feel with how the parents feel with the questions of children, and that makes it, I think, easier for doctors with children to communicate with children. I think my colleagues who don't have children, for them it might be more difficult.
Is there any form of training for this? Because that's one thing you could.
There is no specific training, I think, but I think we can learn, for example, from the pediatricians, because they talk a lot with children, and I have very close contacts with my colleagues from the pediatric department, and we have also good contacts with the social workers who are working at the pediatric department. So if we have if we experience problems for children and their parents in hospital, we can always ask our colleagues for advice. So I think there is a lot of know-how also on the pediatric department.
It's nice to hear, because we always said to the children, well, if you have a question and your mother can't answer that, or your father or your daddy, go to the doctor, and he or she will respond to that. But so we try to create a environment in which the children are allowed and free to go also to the doctors and the nurses to ask their questions. And I think it's very important.
I remember one of my patients had a daughter, and she was, I think, 7 or 8 years old, and she was also very involved in the situation. She's the only child, and her father is also professor at the university, and he was my patient. He is my patient, and he got ill and got cancer, and he said she's very sad because I'm ill and I'm losing my hair and I'm changing but is it possible to bring her? And yes, of course. So I talked with her, and I told her about cancer treatment and that it's a tough period, but that I think her daddy will be healthy afterwards. And then she said, okay, I will tell my classmates. And is it possible to have a specific spreekbeurt? I don't know, a lecture,
presentation.
And then I helped her with her presentation. We did it together and about cancer, and we have a specific program in Netherlands, Klokhuis, which is about cancer treatment. I had a video because my children asked when I was they were younger. And I said, okay, I have a very nice video, you can use it. And she said, oh, I'm so happy I can tell my friends about what's going on with my father. And it was very good that she came to hospital, and we did it together.
Ruocha, you've been quite quiet. Maybe you have some, from a designer's perspective or from your experience, do you think we could even push this further, or do you have any questions or thoughts or about what's?
I'm thinking, because it's really great that they have this kind of room, and also your specialty, your time, and your effort into ensuring that the whole family is fine. But when they're out of the UMC into their general hospital, or let's say other countries where they don't have this much support, and they still have the same problem, and what other resource can they reach out to when they don't have you?
That's a question from you to me. I think if they don't have specific facilities, I think it is always wise to ask advice from the pediatricians, because they have so much experience and so many tools to communicate with children, also about topics that are not easy to discuss with children, and they know about the level for children, because talking with a child of the age of 3 or 4 or it is different from talking about with a child of 7 or 12 or 14 years old. So that's, I think, for me, sometimes difficult to see at what level the child is thinking, and what is the best way to communicate by playing together with a Playmobil, for example, playing with a hospital, or just talking, or making drawings about what's going on. And I think.
Okay. Maybe one last question before you go. If we jump 10 years in the future, what should happen? How could you push this further, even better? The ideas you just told us. You have some ideas about that?
Yeah, I think it would be good if we have more material for children about cancer treatment, and maybe also your Kankerspoken organization can help, because I think specific movies, toys to make to talk about these topics can help us a lot. And I think for patients within hospital, more specific rooms to be together, and in the outpatient clinic also more specific personalized ways for treatment. Support. Yeah.
Great. Thank you very much for being here.
Thanks for letting me participate in your sessions. Yeah.
Great. So after we heard the kind of ideas for the future of Dr. Zijlstra, let's go back a bit more to the original problem, or how we started to think about this issue. I actually experienced that Eva mentioned a few things to me back in June when she was hospitalized in the University Hospital of Antwerp. She was talking to me about the fact that, she was asking me general questions like, maybe, do you have any advice on how parents with young children deal with these kind of issues when they are hospitalized? How can they see their child? Can they use maybe WhatsApp? Can they use Skype? How can they keep in touch with their child? All kind of practical questions. So I reached out at that moment to Nel, to some psychologists of University Hospital of Ghent called Anne Moret and Sarah Cornelis. And I also reached out to a nurse I know in University Hospital of Ghent, Johan de Munter. And I thought, there must be something concrete. And after a while I realized, there's nothing really concrete. I mean, all we have is, I know some people in my network who can actually give some advice. There's nothing really, there's no fit solution, no one solution. But let's think about this issue. And I want to ask all of you, like, what are the key issues for you? How do you experience this problem, and what are the deep issues there that we are struggling with? Maybe I can start with maybe Mark, because you are obviously the partner of Eva and you've experienced this firsthand.
Yes.
What were, in your opinion, things maybe you've heard of other people or things you have experienced yourself?
It's a unique data point, right? So I'm a scientist, so this is just one observation. It's also not one observation with an infant. So our daughter was 6 months when Eva was diagnosed, and now is a bit older. She was 12 when Eva passed away. So I can't relate, or I can't say a lot about how to talk to young children, because she's not ready to talk yet. What I can say is what we experienced, without the ambition to give criticism, because we were in a medical path, and the psychological path is in parallel. But it's less clear, at least to me or to us in the past, how to go through that path. From the start, we were put in an overwhelming roller coaster of emotions. We didn't even have to deal with how to talk to our daughter, because she was too young. But I can imagine that at that point, that's an even bigger aspect which is overwhelming you, even more than what we already had. At that point, so Eva was, as I mentioned before to Dr. Zijlstra as well, Eva was heartbroken. I think the most difficult part of it was that she couldn't see Ida. So she was always 3 to 4 weeks within the hospital. The first 2 weeks were typically in, not in isolation yet, but awaiting the new chemo. Then there was a chemo of 1 week, I guess, and then 1 to 2 weeks of recovery after that. So before, so Ida was in the kindergarten. So that's a big issue with leukemia patients, because they have a very low white blood cell count, so no
resistance
whatsoever, indeed. So this was a continuous struggle, because she wanted to see her, but she couldn't, and she accepted that, of course, because it's a medical reason. But it was very tough, and that's also part of the reason why I was so enthusiastic about the story of Dr. Zijlstra. Before that, they were implementing family-oriented what's it called, room in.
I
didn't even know the concept. But it's a very cool thing to have. It would have made our life a lot easier. And my life was practically at that point in time, to have Ida in the kindergarten, to do my job, and I was very fortunate, still am, to have a self-dependent job, so I could regulate my hours more or less, meaning I didn't have to attend from 9 to 6 or so, or I didn't have a real boss, so I could be flexible. Also, Eva's environment was very flexible, meaning her mother was there every day, also taking care of our daughter if I wasn't able to do that. So a lot of support in private circles. At the hospital side, it's. I think we were very much so in the medical story, and very little so in the psychological story. I also have to add on our own behalf that Eva was not the person to look for psychological help. Her mother once told me that she once asked to see a psychologist in the hospital, and the psychologist entered the room and she said, take a seat. I'm not here to talk about myself, but take a note. These are the things I would like to improve in the hospital. This was the story or the talk with the psychologist. So she didn't really need that. I also didn't really need it, I guess. But it would have been handy to get more guidance, and that we didn't receive. I also didn't ask for it. I'm not sure. I'm not even sure it existed at that point. So that's also a good thing to hear that you're doing precisely that. So we went through this period, focusing a lot on the recovery side, on the medical side, and between the treatments, intensely enjoying each other at home. But the period in the hospital was very, very, very lonely. We considered, on our own behalf, doing things like getting Ida there to see her through a window or so, but that's even worse, I think. To see your 6-month-old daughter through a window and not even be able to touch her. So
that's the problem.
She accepted that.
It's not good touch.
Exactly.
That's the problem.
The tactile thing wasn't there, and then she accepted that. She was strong, but it didn't help. I can tell. That's why I mentioned having a child, an older one even also, to be able to visit within a hospital. It has a feedback effect, which is very strong to the patient as well. The mental side cannot be underestimated.
It can. You mean it can actually give energy back to the parents?
Yeah, and that was not. We didn't do that until the very. So we went through the whole 3 chemos, transplantation, then another hospitalization, and only in the very last phase, meaning in retrospect, the 3 last weeks of her life, then we were told that Ida could attend. We didn't know why things changed at that time. So we were also not informed about that.
Yeah.
But all of a sudden, she was home from kindergarten, and we got the tip, well, maybe now you could bring her. And then I was there with Ida every day. It's not long, it's like half an hour or 3/4 of an hour, but it was a joyful period. Things changed a lot. And then, the last moment, even at intensive care, and this was very beautiful. We, the physicians, I guess, or the doctors at intensive care, and also the hematologist, in cooperation with them, arranged that in the Tuesday before Eva passed away, on Friday night, that Ida could visit intensive care, which was basically, it was strange because babies are not allowed in intensive care, but they arranged for that, and it was, it's for me the most magical moment in the whole thing. So she was only there for 20 minutes. I let them play. They were playing together a bit. Eva was at her last strength at that point in time. But seeing what happened there, and I made a video for Ida. We talked about that, the importance of having concrete moments in time for the future. Then. This was, this is the strongest moments. And then I really was, I started really to see more, because I was in a tunnel before that. And at that point, and also when she passed away, I started seeing, but there is some truth and some importance in having children close to their parents, be in the whole process, and not just when they were at home and resting at home. So also in the hospital. So that's.
I find it very special that you said that you talked about it as magical moments.
Yes.
It
was like that. The moment was difficult to describe. I could show the picture, but it won't show on the podcast. So the setting was like that. Eva was in intensive care, surrounded by machines, of course. And Ida arrived, and she sat down on Eva's lap. Eva was lying on the bed, of course. And they started playing as they always did at home. And she had this little booklet with animal sounds, and she started playing. And for Ida, I assume nothing changed because she was still the mother who was there.
Yeah.
And Eva was keeping herself very strong, and they had a magical moment together.
Yeah.
And you saw it. I was crying in the back, actually, behind the camera. But they were very, very close. Very good. So, and okay, we only had a couple of these moments, unfortunately. But they were very valuable. And that's not something you would want to keep from people, especially not in the last stretch of an illness. So yeah.
Yeah, that's also what's heartbreaking to me is that, actually I felt the first time Eva told me this, it's the most unjust thing that could happen. Even when everything goes wrong, that at least you could have some hope that your future children will be happy and you can be peaceful in the fact that you can leave them in good hands or something, or and that feels so unjust that you didn't have the right information, or that you didn't know, and that maybe things didn't go. It could have been better, Okay, but Nel, you are the psychologist, of course. So that's actually really good. Moving on from Mark to you, what's your, when you hear these kind of stories, is that the typical kind of story? Is that really what you hear?
I don't know if there are typical stories, because every study is typical on their own. And but I think that we can learn a lot of those stories if you put all the stories together, 100, 200, 300 stories. And you talk with parents and you talk with the children, then we can learn a lot about what we can do now and in the future. And sometimes most of the times we do the best we can, but I'm sure we can do better in a lot of things. And one of the things is, for instance, the people who work in the hospital. They mustn't be afraid to go the path with the patient and the parents and the children, because lots of times they said, "Oh, I don't know how to do this," or it's young people. It's affect me emotional. So just what we said, if he's told a story that you see your faces and you said. That's also what's happening into the hospital. The nurses and the doctors said, "Oh God, young patients with young children. I don't want to think about it." And then it stops over there. Yeah. And it's very difficult to go over that, to think about what are the needs of those people. What can I do about it? And I think it's very important to think about that. When things are deeply affecting yourself. Affecting you, then you can't do anything anymore. So what we had to do is to learn from all those stories. And one of the things you said is why was that only possible at the end to come together? I don't know, but we had to learn that that's what we give the message in the future, that think about it, that it's in the whole process, that you try to put parents and children together. Maybe rooming in is a possibility. Maybe you live in a country where it isn't possible or something like that, but it's the attention for it. You must think about it, and then and then there are no solutions, but there are things who's coming up. We are creative people, and we think, well, maybe that's something. It's not a kind of copying thing, things, but it's thinking about it. And you said, well, I think that in our country or in our universal hospital or another hospital in the home setting, that's what we need, and then you are going to work with it. I think that's very important, and there is no magical book. Which is one of the things is very important, that you are transparent. Just what Josée said, that you talk with your children, even if they're very small. You have to talk with it. They feel, they sense that something. They sense the roller coaster, even if you didn't say anything. They sense the roller coaster, and even in we talk about it just there upstairs.
Exactly.
And if they are, that the daughter of Eva, Mark, is going to be bigger, grown up, and then you had to create memories for her, and to think about what's going to happen into the future. It's not the thing that everybody needs a psychologist.
No, I understand.
That's not true.
Yeah.
I like my colleagues, but you can do a lot of things on your own. But it's nice to have good people, people with a lot of experience, to think with you. Where you can phone, for instance, and say, "Well, this is the problem.
Yes.
Please help me now."
What is tough as well is to talk to the children. One, but also to see. You're always on the verge of what could happen next, because it's life-threatening disease. What could happen next? Do I prepare my children to that? It's not only talking about the disease, but also about the potential next step of having this disease, and how to prepare. Should I prepare something for them? This was also it kind of kept Eva busy as well, but Ida was too young, and I assured Eva that I would do all the best, and it happened now as well. All the best to bring that memory to Ida, if it came to that. But if you have to talk to your children about it, that's even tougher.
But even when you are, we don't know how it's going to be in the future. But even when you are open at the start, in the beginning, then it's easier is a strange word. It's not easy to talk about that or something like that. Sure. But is if a child is from the beginning knows what's happening, then it's then he or she knows that he can ask questions, or even is allowed to don't ask questions or something like that.
There's an open dialogue.
And then you open things, and then you can go with it. For instance. But if the start is not like that, then it's going to be difficult.
So. Ruocha, when you hear this kind of problems, of course you're looking from a different perspective. But how do you look at these stories from experience from Nel, experience from Mark? What comes into your mind? What are some key thoughts there you can share with us?
It's really touching and quite heartbreaking for me to hear your story, and it reminds me of some of the cases I studied with my teacher in Singapore, where they have equally good healthcare on the medical side. And probably also good support from the social workers, but just because of the Oriental mentality of not dealing with things, escaping, then things are very different there. For example, there was a guy, he had terminal cancer and is not going to be cured, and he asked the hospital, can I cuddle my wife on my bed? And the hospital says, no, the bed could break. And if you want to do that, you have to go outside of the hospital, but now you're supported with a machine, so you choose. So till the end of his life, he didn't get to touch his wife on the bed, and that's really makes me so sad. And there are so many cases like that, or parents with lymphedema, where they cannot really freely move their limbs, then they cannot hold their children, and they don't know where to go to, and they just keep it to themselves, and it's so heartbreaking to themselves. I cannot hug my children anymore. I don't deserve to be a mother, and then it just goes through that path where there is a bit self-destructive thinking, and they never thought about seeking for help. Like you said, it has to be a good start where people start to talk about stuff. But sometimes it doesn't happen. And I can imagine even in Holland, there are more conservative people, there are immigrants with different cultural backgrounds. And from my graduation project, I see this uneven distribution of healthcare resource. So in Amsterdam, in Groningen, in Leiden, it's good. But if you go to other parts, then maybe there are less doctors who are willing to talk about these. And there was one lady, I talked with her, and she said she was a very open person, and she wanted to ask something about sex. And the doctors and nurses just sort of ran away, like, no, I'm shocked that you asked this. I don't know how to answer you. Then just like it took her so much courage to open up, but it didn't start in the way you want. So what I feel is like us with good educational background and good ability to search for a resource, we're seeing one type of problem, but there's also the hidden population where they're less educated, they don't know where to seek for help, and they're just stuck there. And I want to help them in my project, but now we're talking about parents with children. I can also imagine how hard it is for them.
But I think you had to start somewhere. Eh? That's you can say we had to start in the end of the road and say, well, for instance, in the Oriental countries, it's we in Holland 40 years ago, 30 years ago, it was the same.
Yeah,
there was people don't talk about cancer.
Yeah, that's true.
They saw about the letter C or the letter K in Holland, and that's it. So that's now I think 40 years ago.
Yeah, that's
there wasn't talking about it. Just this in 40 years, 45 years, a lot of things have changed. And I know when I give my first lecture about children with a parent with cancer, it was in the south of Holland, in Maastricht, and it was a huge public, about 350 people or something like that. And there was one man on the first row, row, and he started crying, and he was just in my my field, and he started crying. I think he was 75 or something like that. And he came to me after the lecture, and he said to me, my father was ill, and we had 10 children. He said, my father was ill. I was 9 years old. He was going to the hospital. No one of the children knows what's happening. My father was going to the hospital, and he never returned. And nobody told us, the 10 children, what's happening. And he said, I have searched all my life for my father, because I don't understand it. And they said, in that time, don't bother, don't tell it to the children, they are too young. And so they thought, his parents thought, it was all right to do that. And we learned now, well, that you could do it in another way.
So
it was the history, it was the period over there, and with that experience, we try to change things, even in other countries or something like that.
I think the fact that there is a taboo around cancer and all the other topics around it is still a big burden. I think we touch on something really deep here, and I was diagnosed with leukemia when I was 14, and I was also told outside of the diagnostic room. It was first my mother who heard it, and okay, that's a long time ago, and things change, but still, I feel that there is still the idea that the patient has to be treated on his own, like, not surrounded by children. They isolate the person, and secondly, they if the children are around, they paternalize them very much, and they say like, okay, we know what's best for the children, and of course there is a balance to strike there, but it's still something we need to explore further, I think.
I think it's good to protect children, of course, from a lot of things. You don't put 3-year-olds on a bicycle and put it here in Amsterdam. That's ridiculous. But what you had to do is to learn the child the rules. Then he can bike even in Amsterdam. So and it's the same. It's the same. It's the same thing. We had to learn our children to go on with difficult things. To learn how to manage difficult things.
Yeah, I completely agree, and
it's a tough balance, I think. Because the children have to remain or keep their innocence, if you want, right? But also be confronted with real life. And it's the parents' responsibility, if you want, to keep that delicate but important balance. It's it's very tough. So having again, Ida is too young, but for instance, to give a small story. So one of Eva's nieces is a children psychologist. And when Eva passed away, I was asked. I received like a whole list of what I could do at that point in time. And some of the things are elegant and nice to do, but other things. There was one example which I did. I had to go to the mortuary and to greet Eva with surrounding, but also with Ida. And the reason was that by observing how other people reacted to the body, if you want, at that point in time, because she was passed away for 4 days at that point in time, Ida could infer that something had changed, being a 12-month-old baby, but still, and could grow onto that. So sometimes as a parent, I can talk a bit about that now, you have to do things which feel very uncomfortable but are important for the child. And I'm not sure whether there's a concrete guideline or a booklet to read about that, to know what this balance is, because we have to discover it as we are going on. But maybe I'm not sure. Okay, we are in the next phase. We are not living next to a cancer patient. We are in the next phase now. But I'm not sure whether everything I'm doing is correct, even though I'm very considerate and very conscious about what I'm doing with Ida now, with the daughter.
We never do that. We never know that as a parent, huh?
You can't compare?
Even in a healthy situation.
No,
Yes.
of course.
We don't know
of course, exactly. You never know. I always think about it as an economist. I'm an economist. Do I do more damage or more good now?
Okay.
And if the net effect is positive, I'm happy with that. So it's
Okay, so thank you. I think we have quite a good understanding of some key points now of the problem that these people face who have cancer, and also some children. So maybe we can think a little bit about what kind of solutions are already out there, what things already exist, and maybe we can also already start to think about potential things that could be improved in the future as well. Maybe we can start with you, Mark. You have already some knowledge of what goes on in the University Hospital of Antwerp. Maybe we can start from there.
Limited knowledge, because again I have only one data point in Antwerp. What exists is not a lot yet. What already was planned by the hospital is to create a family-oriented room, meaning so they have one floor with leukemia, or broader even blood patients if you want. And there is a room which was, so there will be a renovation of this floor. A room which was foreseen to become a family room, meaning a room where, in the afternoon during visit hours, children can come to visit their parents, their mother or their father, with some games, with some books, with maybe the possibility to have a PlayStation or so, something which creates a nice harmonious atmosphere. But I think it could be pushed further, and that's also part of the plan, to make it like a general purpose room, meaning that also patients could use it before opening or visiting hours, meaning hospital staff or floor staff could use it as a room to have meetings or to have interaction with other patients or with patients in general, or with parents, so like a room which has a lot of purposes. Only in that sense you're able to create a responsibility feeling, or that the staff wants to follow the room. It should be the content should be changing over time. It should be a nice and welcoming room, if you want. Not just like a cafeteria, but more with a sofa or with some nice painting on the wall. So we have a lot of ideas about that. And what we are doing concretely is, so we knew the plan existed. So Eva, in parallel, she didn't know that, but she hinted to that in the talk she had with Pieter. And we raised funding to help the hospital to create that room further. So we already raised quite some money after. So on the morning letter we indicated there was a funds possibility, and a lot of people donated money to that, even without knowing anything more. We just mentioned that we wanted to do something for the children of cancer patients. We raised quite some money already, and now we're doing another concert. So Eva was very much involved in the classical music sector, So we are organizing a concert in December in the opera in Ghent.
14th of December?
14th of December, exactly.
And that's
in
it's in Ghent, in Belgium, in Flanders.
Exactly.
So
yes,
for anybody who's listening.
So this will be a series of, I'm not sure even whether it's that public, but it should.
Yeah.
So it's already quite popular. And people can donate something, meaning that they can just deposit something on the account of the hospital by now.
Yeah.
Can also get a physical certificate for that if they want to use it in their taxes. And on that date, it's about Eva, but more generally about life, I think. And you have musicians, from the circle of Eva, opera soprano who is singing. We have the sister of Eva who's a harpist and etc. playing. So it's a short program but intense, and we again hope to raise money with that. It's already coming in now. So creating quite some budgets, first of all for this family room, and whatever is left at this point we will donate to scientific research on this specific cancer. That's the plan at least.
So there are some good perspectives in the University Hospital of Antwerp. I also know from my personal experience that when I was a patient in the University Hospital of Ghent, that they also have kind of a room they call the living, where they basically support parents who are in treatments by giving them the space for their partner to have like a daycare center there, so they can pick up the child and bring it to the parent and back, but also have the possibility to go to the patient without having to worry about the child. So the child can be there with the support of the staff there. That's one thing that exists in University Hospital of Ghent. I also thought about Dr. Zijlstra mentioning the rooming in system. Actually, the pediatric oncology ward in Ghent has also some type of this system. And I guess more of these hospitals already start to exist.
A lot of children's hospitals have rooming in at the moment.
Nel, what else is there to add to the list? I guess a ton of things, but maybe some key things you think that may be interesting to people who have never heard of this problem or are right in the midst of this chaos.
Yeah, it is. You talked about people from other countries. One of the things we will do with Kankerspoken is that there will come a translation in English, so that a lot of more people can use the information. And not because we said you had to do it on this way, but take what you need. So just take from it what you said. This is important for me, and the rest is there. And I think that's one of the things we would like to do. And maybe also, I think also it's important to make more little movies. Just one minute or 1.5 minutes, because a lot of, for instance, parents are not so good in give information, or maybe it's reading problems, or so you can visualize something, and there's a lot of text, a lot of information, but some people. It is too difficult sometimes. So you can. I think you had to make even more information on different ways. Just not only on paper and not only in reading message, but also on movies or YouTube or something like that.
Do you have a volunteer base, let's say, who's going to the hospitals or to talk to people?
No, with Kankerspoken not, but it's we have the communication goes by email.
Okay.
And if people need specialized care or support, then we are going to look with them in their environment, which are the best solutions.
Yes.
So if somebody in the southern part of Netherlands said, I need a psychologist for my 13-year-old child or something, then we go, we look what's in your what's in.
And they come to you directly or through the hospital or directly?
The hospital are said, well, this organization is for this purpose, and people can sign in or can look at the on the website and then ask the questions. They can ask questions on the website.
Yes. If we go to a very concrete example, say I'm diagnosed today, some in the 30s, I have a young child like in the case of Eva, with 12 months or younger. What would you advise to somebody like that? Does it matter? Should we choose Belgium or Netherlands or for the example, or I guess let's choose the example of somebody is diagnosed in the Netherlands with a child of 12 months old. What's kind of, are there some steps you could advise them, or would you just say?
One of the things is that I should say that it's important to that there's enough attention for the child, and sometimes it is what it is. You can't do more than your best. We say. But for instance, you have a lot of caregivers, in maybe the grandparents and an aunt or a neighbor, and you can say, well, don't try to focus on 2 or 3 caregivers and not on 20 or something like that. You know, so that's the practical side. There are also. You can also give little tips also on the with the very small children.
If somebody hears this and they feel like, okay, I have this similar problem, can they just send an email to Kankerspoken?
Yeah.
And I will share the email address in the description of the podcast. Can you also say the email address right now?
It's I think it's kankerspoken.gmail.
Okay.
At gmail.com.
Yeah, I will also.
I'm not
note
sure
it
about
after
it, but I think so.
I
think so.
That's not a problem. We'll also mention it.
Yeah.
So having heard these solutions, we also have Ruocha, who brings a lot of experience from other parts of the world. But you mentioned in China or in other countries, situations are much worse. Are there any other solutions or existing things that maybe could be used from those parts of the world, or?
Honestly, I don't know that much, but you remind me of design from TU Delft. It's for kids with compromised immunity, that they have this magnetic little wooden parts connected from the inside and outside. So you can actually interact with your kid. And I think that opens a door for, like, how do we change the interaction between people without pushing big changes in the healthcare system? And I think that's what we can do as designers, to see what little things we can add into this current situation.
I think that's very important, because the interaction is, that's what it is, the interaction.
When you cannot physically touch, maybe the magnetic thing is a plan B that can still make things a bit easier.
Okay, to round up, because this was just a very short beginning. I'm reassuring all of you. Maybe I asked the question to Dr. Zijlstra, what would be your future vision? Maybe each of you can give some more already hints towards the future or possible solutions we could imagine, and then maybe if there is a next session we can continue on that strand. Any of you who wants to kick off and continue with the dreaming for the future?
Well, maybe I hope that there's a lot of there will be a lot of sessions like this in which people share experience without coming with a whole bunch of solutions, but listen to each other and try to find out which important things which things you can have for yourself. So I think that's one of the because there you can make something, and then
exactly,
then people said,
because one of the key things you mentioned is there is not one solution.
No.
There is everybody's unique. So maybe a good starting point will already be to kind of do more research, gather these stories. Would that be a good idea?
Well, but we know something. It's not that we all are different people and they're all different situations. But we know, for instance, in the last years, even from the research, that it's important to be open, and it's important that that you have that there is interaction. So we have those things. We know that it's important, and it's like little hoe noem je dat? Kapstokken?
Yeah. Little points of reference.
And there you can try to put the things on. And so there's not one solution, but there are things we know.
And if you walk in 10 years' time here in VUMC in the University Hospital of Amsterdam Medical Center, and you're maybe working there, or maybe you're looking there. But what do you see? What has changed in the way how people interact? How all these important things you mentioned? How would that look like?
I think it's a very difficult question. I think because, well, for once, I hope that the whole theme isn't that it's not necessary to talk about it because there is no cancer anymore.
I was about to say that therapies are there to treat the leukemia, and then that is my hope and expectation at least. Let's say immune therapy or other therapies take over and they create a more humane environment.
And maybe some if it's still there, maybe some integrated pathway where children are fully where doctors and patient and healthcare professionals fully aware of the problems of children, and that they are respected and really involved in this journey of the mother and father in a really nice, respectful way. That could be nice in terms of rooming in, but maybe we can think much further, and that's.
Rooming in is one. That's just what you said. You can also think about other things in your country or in your town or in your own situation, in which you said, well, that's the best for us on this time.
But I think the common goal is to make people feel that it's all right to talk about it. They're not alone. They're not overreacting for all these emotional burdens, and there is a solution somewhere, and you can take a step and find us, find the expert, find foundations like yours.
And it's nice to know that you know children are reacting to to heavy things that happen, and they're developed. They are grow up, and then something's happening, and then you see that they are reacting. And if a parent knows that it's the reaction is normal, then you can say it's not easier. It doesn't make it easier, but at least you know, okay, it's a normal reaction, and we are doing well. You know, that's what parents said.
I agree.
We're doing well.
Those feelings are essential.
The child is sad or is angry or and it isn't easy, but it's good to know that you're doing well.
Whatever it will be something that makes parents feel like we are good parents, and the children can be the children they need.
It nicely touches on something I feel personal as something which could contribute. So I'm a very, very big proponent of having the play.
Yes.
Bringing play as an element in the equation, if you want. So on the one hand, that's where I was leading to before, find this right balance. So on the one part of the balance is be fair, be honest, be transparent to your child, because the children can absorb a lot more and in greater depth than you can even imagine. On the other hand, it could get very serious and very tough, and a nice and harmonious counterbalance to that seriousness is play. Cooperative play, having parents play with their children, even in a hospital area. So that's also part of the thing. Things I want to implement. It's my own background as well, of course. But even beyond that, having that as a possibility, having a playful room in a hospital environment is magic. Even for children which are not hospitalized, coming there and be able to play with their parents. Because playing, this is my own background, playing in a game, you're not thinking, oh, but he's ill and she's healthy. You're always playing with the person, and it brings at any age, but especially children, it brings them to a very harmonious state, and it nicely or neatly counterbalances to any negative emotion which could propel from bringing tough stories to children. So,
Ruocha, any other thoughts you want to add to the future perspective?
Oh, I just hope whatever resource anyone has, they can take one step further to see more light in the future, that it's gonna be a little bit better at least. Yeah, because some people have a lot, some people don't have much, but there's always something that can be done to make it slightly easier for them.
Yeah, and to come back to what you said earlier, hopefully in the future there won't be any step anymore to take for people who have not such a high education, and maybe hopefully in the future there are easy accessible things, easily comprehensible for people who don't have a high education and who feel equally welcome and equally treated well in the hospital.
That's also what I'm working on after my graduation, to make sexuality care lower barrier for people. So even if they cannot really formulate the question in a medical way, they can still find what they want, and they will be guided toward the resource they need. Yeah.
Any other additions? Okay, well, thank you so much all for coming here. It was great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.